Hey,
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight for Stronger. I am here with Phil Merton and Mark Wenzel, although right now I should probably say Mark Wenzel and Phil Merton because that's the order of things. Tonight
and
we're going to be
Tweety.
talking.
Don't forget Tweety. I can see Tweety up there.
Oh, yeah, and don't forget Tweety the cat.
Tweety.
All right. So,
Also, some notification chime.
yes, I need to turn that off.
Mm.
Anyway, if you're here with us tonight watching, let us know in the chat, and we'll respond. Let us know. Well, one thing you can let us know is where you're watching us from.
Hmm.
Before we kind of get into the conversation, we want to lay the groundwork for that. So tonight we're going to be talking about distance ministry, uh, and specifically with Stronger. One of the focuses, well, the main focus here with Stronger is walking with returning citizens. But that process of walking with returning citizens doesn't just start once they leave the prison or the jail. It's something that starts even before that. And so it's important to take into consideration how do we start and establish relationships
Hmm.
even during incarceration.
Yeah,
And
well put. Yeah, it's not. You just can't just unrealistic to say walk out the doors and bam, everything's different now. Now we connect. Gotta ease people into it.
thank you. So it is a good thing that we have you, Mark, and you, Phil, because this is something that you both work with. So why don't we start with you all sharing your experiences? We'll start with Mark, actually.
There's Mark.
You're going to start with me.
Yes. Well, you're right there. So
I'm right there. So, experiences of distance ministry,
Mhm.
you say?
Had to do a lot of that when COVID shut
Well,
down and
yeah.
access. We
That's true.
nothing
That's
else
true.
we could do.
That came about, yeah, because of for us, right, as COVID. Yeah, when COVID first started and I got booted out of the jail where I was going to, I did uh, for a number of months keep in contact with people that had been in class with me, and we were doing some class material back and forth. Back just forth. I was sending it to them. They weren't sending anything back to me, but it was a one-way directional thing. That after a number of months, I got burned out,
Hmm.
and I kind of like, this is, I can't sustain this by myself, kind of thing. That was because it wasn't what I had been doing for so many years, and it wasn't what I really wanted to be doing. So I was kind of like
Hmm.
not really putting my best foot forward in that respect, with that kind of thing. So, on the fly, you look back and you say, yeah, we could have done a lot better there, and probably could still have been, kept things going. But
Hmm.
my experience throughout COVID was that people would start something
Mhm.
in different types of ministry. Like hospital ministry actually became distant for a while for us. I was making phone calls from my office in the hospital to people in their rooms because I couldn't go visit them.
Wow.
And that too, it was like, oh, this is so weird and so different.
Hmm.
And thankfully there was an end to that we saw fairly quickly, that we were able to get back face to face with people and continue. But there again, there were some other things that we had started doing, and then those tailed off. And because you just sustaining something, if it's not where you started, to sustain it, I think is really hard.
Hmm.
And I'll pass with that.
I think too that
So
not just chiming in the fact that it was one way, but that's really hard to maintain. You send it out with the greatest of uh, hopes and intentions, and is it landing? Without that feedback, it's just hard to keep the energy going. I mean, I had to do it. Uh, I didn't have any correspondence. Can't have correspondence. The people in state prison. at least in Wisconsin. But I was sending out worship videos. I was preaching into a camera for
Hmm.
quite a while because the one of the chaplains had asked for that, and so I fine, I can do that, but yeah, no feedback. Nobody's saying amen. So it was hard to maintain that. So those are the downsides. What were you going to say, Ruth?
Well, it's I was going to say something, and then what you brought up also brought something to mind for me. So go back to that first thing that I was going to say,
Yeah.
and what I noticed kind of in my mind as you were talking about, you're basically describing the same thing for hospital ministry as far as jail ministry, in that there's a there's a degree to which it had everything had to be done from a distance. But in my mind, when you were saying that concerning hospital ministry, it was like, wow, how do you do that? Like, people need that contact, especially when they're in the hospital.
Right.
But I didn't necessarily have the same kind of reaction. I was like, that's not a good thing that it is distant, but it wasn't like to the extent. And I think maybe part of that has to do with like the distance that's created, kind of socially, having to do with people in hospital versus people in prison.
Yeah, that is a good
Hmm.
point. It's part of what incarceration is about. The penalty for you having committed the crime, been convicted of the crime you're convicted of, is separation from family, separation from your community, and a lot of the normal things of society. So it's understandable. It's part of incarceration. Um, boy, at the same time, guys were going crazy with that. They couldn't have visits. I mean, sure, the visit is a poor substitute for living with your family, but it's still it's contact. I'm there with them, and now they're not.
Mhm.
I think that's something really neat that you picked up on, Ruth, is the different reaction one might have to a very similar situation,
Hmm.
depending on what the population is in the hospital, in jail or prison. And we quite fall into it pretty naturally to look at those two populations differently.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And we will accept things not happening in.
Oops,
Uh-oh.
he froze. He froze. He's frozen.
I'm having some connection issues, maybe.
Ah,
Oh,
there he
there you
is.
are.
I'm
We're
back.
back.
Okay.
You're back.
So, but that was, that was very interesting. I hadn't thought of it that way, that,
Hmm.
we might even think along different lines because of the actual location of where this separation is taking place.
Hmm.
Prison,
Yeah.
hospital. Yeah.
But in person connections in corrections facilities, it's just so important to people to feel that connection. It's, I mean, like I said, sure, it's part of the penalty that you should pay for whatever crime you committed. At the same time, you we don't want to set people up for failure. We want people to re-enter their communities successfully when they complete their sentence. Uh, so that includes remaining connected with your community, remaining connected with the people you care about and who care about you, uh, which, like I said, took a hit during COVID. Uh, so that was a time when it necessitated a lot of distance stuff, but it just intensified something that's always been there. There is a separation. There's a razor wire between the greater community and the people who are incarcerated. Uh, so you do what you can to get through the razor wire and be in person, but can't always do it.
Mhm.
And so you find workarounds.
Yeah, and something else that's kind of coming to mind for me as you're talking is, it slipped away that quickly, but basically, um, actually, I'll let you all talk while I try to think of the idea that came to mind again.
Thoughts are so slippery, aren't they? Like little fish, they swim right in and out of our brains. Yeah.
I'm just thinking in the sense of you were talking, Phil, of that this is what incarceration is.
Mm.
This separation, and the question that is in my mind. Okay, go ahead, Ruth.
Okay, so this is what came to mind for me actually, is having to do with the idea of separation and the way that is in mind, and kind of going back to technology, and that distance that's there, even as we're continuing to try and walk with people who are in prison. Kind of, it seems kind of counterintuitive, and I believe this may be something that we talked about a bit before, but kind of this idea of separation of people who are incarcerated, um, while at the same time understanding that people who are incarcerated will one day be returning citizens.
Hmm.
And so that idea there, is something that's kind of coming to mind for me too, and the importance, of, if that is going to be something that's implemented, something that's used, that being done in an effective way that doesn't kind of feed that system of isolation.
Right. Definitely. Yeah. Isolation does things to people, and they're not good. So yeah, trying to make connections whenever possible. There's been for many years, there's been prison pen pal programs going on to as a way of bridging that gap. How do you connect with a guy when you can't, because of just impractical or whatever, to get in and see them. Yeah, sometimes people sign up for prison pen pal programs. There's a lot of P's in that title there. Uh, I know the Wisconsin Synod Special Ministries has had something like that going for decades, and it's been real helpful. I talk to guys who have just so appreciated that somebody writes to me, especially guys that just don't have connections. They burned their bridges in the outside world or whatever. Uh, have somebody out there that writes to me by name, asks me how I'm doing, etc. It's a good
Mm.
thing.
Yeah.
And I've heard of the benefit to the person writing to the
Mhm.
prisoners, where now they may never ever meet that person. It's usually quite distance that they're writing, but they hear things. In these conversations, they get to know a bit about them and break through some of the stereotypes, break through some of the that distance
Yeah.
that's there simply because they're in prison,
Hmm.
and start to realize that they're human beings with these connections and families and concerns and wants and desires and worries and fears. And I can only imagine, and I heard it from some, that helps them, be more aware of somebody locally that
Hmm.
might be, you know, they're going to think in terms of local things. Is somebody coming to the congregation? Um, and so in that sense, if you've got people in your congregation who are being pen pals to somebody, however distant, they're probably going to be better at welcoming somebody locally into the congregation
Yep.
because they'll be prepared for it, even though it's not the same person,
Yeah.
but they will just be in their heart and their spirit better prepared.
Hmm. Absolutely. Benefit goes two ways.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Good point.
Yeah, that's a wonderful thing that they had set that up, like you say, decades ago. Have
Hmm.
a really good system in place that identities are protected.
Yeah.
There's the there isn't too much information being shared,
Hmm.
and that's yeah, it's been a well done program as far as I know.
Yeah.
So I'm going to throw in a question here, kind of to make this more personal and bring it home. Um, Phil, Mark, and we'll start with you this time, Phil. Have you had any experiences with people who, have kind of been on, the sending, receiving end of, these kinds of communications, and what is that like, and what have you heard in regard to that?
The people I've talked to, well, I just get a little bit of uh, information about that from the guys who in prison who get the correspondence, and it's
Mm.
just they're just so grateful, just so happy to have that connection. And the people who are on the sending end, uh, I same thing that their world gets wider. They start realizing that well, look at the world of this person I'm talking with here. So different from me, and yet we're finding out about all our similarities, and especially when find out that we both are disciples of Jesus, and they people are just amazed by how great this experience is.
All right. Now, Mark, on to you.
I've only had the experience, I believe, of the person, the sender, and having a conversation with that person. She'd come up to me, every time you get a letter back, she'd just be so, because it
Mhm.
was sometimes challenging because of what the situation was that the person was sharing. Challenging if it was asking questions about the Bible at times, and she had to dig deep to
Mhm.
sometimes think about how to answer. I mean, she did that on her own. She didn't go, "Hey, pastor, help me,"
Ah,
but she
nice.
exercised her faith and really enjoyed that. And
Mm.
yeah, she just and then just that depth of empathy of, my goodness, what this person is going through. The stories that tug at the heart. And but yeah, just a wonderful experience all around. Never heard anything negative.
Mhm.
So I think it's interesting that that you're both coming at this your experience from different angles. Phil, you from the side of the person who is incarcerated, and Mark, also you from the side of someone who is who's writing correspondence and in the conversation that way. Um, and I'm hearing what you're saying as far as like the benefit there and seeing that in these experiences, but something else that I'm seeing within this is something that I feel like it's important that we connect with again. Even we've connected with it a bit in the past, and that's this idea of people within prison ministry or jail ministry, or as we're trying to walk alongside with people, the experience is going to be different.
Mhm. Definitely.
It's going to be different from person to person. And so as we're looking at that, and especially people who are trying to get an idea of how their church can get involved with this, um, that's something for them to keep in mind, is that people can share experiences, but it's also going to vary from person to person,
Yep.
even though there's central things that may be the same.
Mhm. True that. I do believe that the vast majority of people that have gotten involved with, not just distance prison ministry, but any kind of prison ministry, it's they're I hear over and over again, this has been so good for me. In fact, just this is again not about distance ministry, but just kind of just the opposite. My one friend of mine, just talked to him this afternoon. He does a weekly Bible class at a jail, and his father died over the weekend, and he called me to see about the possibility of me subbing for him, and it was going to be tough for me to do it. And as the more we talked, the more he started thinking, something, I need to go do this. I need to get to that. Just, I told him, take it easy on yourself. Grief is hard work. And he said, I know this is going to help me. Getting
Mhm.
together with my guys at jail. This is what I need right now. Which I totally get. I told him my experience too. When there's been death in my family, and I'm grieving. Man, some of the best, most helpful, kind support I got was from guys who were in prison green.
Yeah, and I think I don't have any, numbers as far as like people like in the pen pal ministry and that, or even our volunteers who have, how many of them have had experience with the system in some way, shape, or form,
Mm-hmm.
either personally or with, relatives. And in a hospital, definitely, there's people who've come in to volunteer and be chaplains and that who have had again, their own personal experiences or family experiences that have said, this is where I need to be. I need to do something in this field. And so and what that does, like you say, by working through, by being there and having these conversations, you actually work through a lot of your own things.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's not the reason you're going, but it's
Right.
a benefit of being involved is that because you're in a relationship with someone and you actually, um, we grow when we're in relationships and we work through our issues in our relationships. There's always the caveat of, just remembering it's like, what's my main purpose here?
Mm-hmm.
And some of the side things that come along.
Yeah.
And again, sometimes a group like you've experienced, Phil, is the group will, no, we're going to help you today.
Mm-hmm.
And it's their decision to
Yeah.
help you.
Uh-huh.
You didn't go necessarily totally looking for it, but they make that decision. No, we're going to let you talk about that today,
Mm.
because that's why we're all here.
Yep.
And just yeah.
We're talking about just regular snail mail here with this prison pen pal thing. Something that's come up in the past. I'm not sure how long ago it started, but something that used to be impossible, unthinkable, has become possible and thinkable. Internet correspondence with people used to be. I remember years ago, somebody asked me if it'd be possible to get introduce somebody to some show on the internet or something like that. And I said, "No, they don't have access to internet. What do you think criminals do when they can get on the internet? They commit crimes." So that's held back from guys in prison, but not so much anymore. They've found there's been I'm not sure what's the term I'm looking for. Platforms, different internet services have been set up expressly for uh, corrections facilities that they can be monitored. They are very, very limited in what you can access, where you can go. Um, and with that, guys, a lot of places are. A guy can acquire a tablet specifically made for this purpose for internet access in a corrections facility, and emails can be sent and given with relatives. And this is where my ministry got in on this, sending out grace links, devotions is what they're called. It's through Core Links is the name of the company that provides the internet access, and we are able to send out was it one or two devotions every week to guys who sign up for it. Uh, Devotions are geared toward incarceration situations, toward people who are incarcerated, and we have the ability to respond when they reply. We can there can be communication back and forth.
Nice. I I'm gonna say something here because I think as we're thinking about people who are currently incarcerated and their access to the internet, there might be some people who think that and think about that and automatically their response is that shouldn't be the case. They shouldn't have access to the internet.
Hmm.
But something that kind of came to mind for me as I was thinking about, okay, how do we take this back a little bit so that people can think about it kind of in a different context? And for me, what's coming to mind is actually the concept of dieting, because as you are restricting yourself more and more, the most restrictive diets are the ones that are broken a lot faster.
There you
But
go.
when we have a healthier relationship with food, for example, like in this case, then it's easier to say, okay, I'm going to like maybe cut back here or cut back there, not because it's something that you have to do, but because there's more of a like a personal regulation there. And when we're talking about people who are currently incarcerated, going back to this idea of those people who are currently incarcerated being people who will one day be returning citizens, if there's a healthier relationship that's developed now that involves the things that they will encounter once they're out of jail or prison, then that's something that they can turn to with like self-regulation, not because it's something that they've been restricted from, but something that they have like a healthier relationship with, that they can themselves moderate because of that healthier relationship.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, deprivation model is not, it's a poor way to regulate things.
Mm-hmm.
And he said diets. Yeah, that's people that try to starve themselves thin. You're right. It's broken. Sure, you get thin, and then you start eating to make up for it, and you get put on more weight than you had to begin with. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
sure, yep, you're right. The same thing here. Uh, when you're deprived, just builds up. Well,
And even
what Paul
going
said. Go ahead.
even going kind of to a more extreme example, when we look at hoarders and kind of the motivation
Mhm.
behind that, one of the things that can often be behind that is a degree to which there's like this conception that I don't have, I'm lacking. How do
Mhm.
I then like get away from that? Well, the way that I get away from that is by getting more and more stuff.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like the reverse of that.
Yep. So I, it's not like there's much. Like I said, it's very limited access what you can get on these tablets
Mm-hmm.
and the internet access. There's some, but it's pretty safe. Uh, but it does. It's part of life now. To everybody as we go on the internet for stuff, and to sit in prison and have no access to that it's not part of your life, and well, get out and all of a sudden that's such a big part of life. Well, it's a pretty tough adjustment. So this is helpful. uh, got some access, and I'm just really grateful that we are able to use this for ministry.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember the figures now, Mark, maybe you remember. Prior to COVID lockdown, we had, how many people were getting these internet access devotions? It was a couple dozen, maybe.
At the most. I think we started like with one or two
Mm,
in a couple months before COVID actually hit. And
okay.
then, we might have added a couple more, and then it just took off from there. We're up over 400 people that are receiving, devotions,
Mm,
as that word has spread. And yeah, it was interesting to look back and saying, we got the request to do the email before COVID was even on the radar,
mm,
and we started doing it. And so we were actually ready to do it
mm,
when, when the lockdowns came. It was like,
mm,
oh, we'll just keep going. And we just kept pouring it into it and really going with that. I'm going back to what, Ruth was talking about in the sense of, what are people thinking about, these people in prison, what they're doing, if they have access to something, what are they going to do? And just one of the things that's so prevalent is, we've been fed a steady diet on TV and TV shows of, the worst of the worst who are in prison.
mm,
Mm-hmm.
And that's the concept that we have. And are there some really terrible people out there in some situations that are doing things? Yeah. Probably that would, be totally out of control. But my feeling is the vast majority are people who, given the opportunity, will make some good choices,
mm,
and are capable of making good choices, um, when they're given that opportunity, when they're given the space to do it and the safety to do it.
mhm.
Mm-hmm.
Right, that widening your world thing that I talked about before, that one of the benefits to making connections, us and the outs with people who are behind the wires, uh, it it works in reverse too. The desperate need to widen my world. My for a lot of people, my community, my network of relationships it hasn't been the greatest. Uh, I've hung with people who have a lot of bad habits and make bad choices, and I made bad choices along with them. So to connect with people who are making some better choices, making some different choices in life, it expands the world.
Mm.
And boy, when I get the chance to make a different choice, hey, I'll take it. That like what you were saying, Mark. Given the chance. Right now, this I wish I could say more about. Wish I could say more about the what's possible. How to even get this thing going. I wasn't in on this correspondence thing. I mean, I'm just thinking if a congregation would like to give this a try, I guess they'd have to get a hold of our ministry, institutional ministries, im.life, and ask, because I don't know what all is involved, but I do know this much. There's every facility or every prison system, jail system has its own internet access thing. It's not one uniform thing. So different arrangements have to be made. And there's a cost. That's the other thing. There is a cost involved. Not only the initial cost of the tablet for the inmate, but each email costs. Uh, that's where we've had donors jump in and say, we'll cover that cost so that the inmates aren't out anything. Uh, that's worked real well. But just got to keep that in mind. So that's that's one of the things that when you talk about distance, bridging this distance in some way, shape, or form. Uh, Here we're making these contact, a letter, an email, a devotion. Now, the other thing to keep in mind is developing a relationship that can be maintained and sustained once a person gets out. Um, uh, Frequently, the people in our ministry, the staff and volunteers who are going in and visiting guys, there will be a request for church membership. I'd like to join a church. Can you help me out? And you take the guy through a membership course. He finishes, he qualifies to be a church member. And what a great thing that can be to connect with, to become official part of a congregation. Some maybe never been before. Had that happen several times, and it's just a real joy to see that happen.
Yeah.
I don't know what's your experience with been with that, Mark?
I'm I haven't had much of that in my settings, but I just popped in my head as you were talking about, people in prison who want to join a congregation. And the flip side of that is people who've gone to prison who are members of a congregation
Yeah.
and the need to maintain
Yep.
that connection. Um, and that can be very difficult because sometimes people are, you know, ashamed, embarrassed. My loved one is in prison, and so maybe we just don't even want to talk about it. We just kind of drift
Mm-hmm.
away from the church, even the people at home.
Mm-hmm.
But to be able to, find open arms, they're like, no, we're here for you at home, and we're going to be there for him there. Whether it's, the and there, I know you start talking about distance, and that can become a problem with
Mm-hmm.
state prison because you can often be housed a long ways away from home.
Yeah.
And with our institutional ministries, we have people that are out at some of these distant places who could go visit, but it's not, pastors, not family. How
Yep.
do we get? What can the home congregation do to help family stay connected? What
Mm-hmm.
can what can the pastor do to help the family stay connected? Because that is so very important, and just the openness of saying it's okay. And I did have
Yeah.
that where I did have a young man from a congregation that was in jail for a while, and took the family a little bit to, say, yeah, he's there. Um, but then it was like it was open door to go visit him and see him and
Mm.
keep them connected. And it was helpful for them.
Mm.
It seems like as we're talking about state prison and the way that you're describing that, that it would be important, even more so, to have networks of organizations because of that distance,
Mhm.
so that there's support there also, as kind of as we're looking at that. Is that something that you've seen?
Yeah. You got man, Mark, you got too much life going on at your house. You get dogs, you get babies. Man. Uh, gosh, give me a nice sterile household like mine. All is calm, all is bright.
Yeah,
Um,
Gulliver can be a pain there. Saturday night I was sitting up here with my grandson, and he actually was starting to, after a few hours, it was like starting to snooze off, and then Gulliver hears something, woof,
how?
right in his ear practically. He's like, wah, you know.
Jeez.
Thanks a lot, dog.
Uh-huh.
Okay, time to get up, do something else. But yeah,
But
it's lively. It's lively.
networking. It said so that somebody from southeast Wisconsin gets sent up over to a prison in far northwest Wisconsin, and what do we do? Yeah, it's it's in some ways a poor substitute to have some guy pop in and say, "Hi, you don't know me, but your pastor sent me, and here I am." But still, it's something. It's a connection. It shows, hey, they care about me. They're trying. I've done that with any number of people to pop in and say, "Well, here I am," and uh, even though you never met me before, your pastor asked me, so here, see if we can make this work. And it's an expression of care.
Is there not a way of making people aware that there's going to be a change, or
You mean that the person coming to visit them won't be the pastor that they're used to, that kind of thing?
yes?
Yeah, it's good when somebody can soften the blow, give them some word ahead of time. We always try to encourage that, but sometimes I know I show up and they're like, "Who are you?" Uh, and I explain, and okay, you get past that awkward part. But yeah, hopefully the home pastor is in touch. Again, I can't overstress how important that is. Keep the communication going. Uh, write when receive phone calls. Okay, that takes me on another little side trip. Um, I mentioned that there's expense involved in these internet connections, and well, we have people that are footing the bill for this, so that the inmates aren't out any money for uh, getting an email or sending an email to us. Uh, but it can be there's some expense involved for family members to connect with their people they love. That if they're traveling, well, of course, that's an expense. It's taking off a day, gas money, blah blah blah. If they connect via video connections, that a lot of places now have that. You can connect from a distance location and have a visit. Uh, that's great, except that in most cases it's expensive. Uh, the service providers are not giving this service away. It can be prohibitive. So to find ways to help the families out, uh, that can be a ministry for the congregation. How can we help you and your family stay together?
Yeah, I think that's a huge one, and I haven't heard too many guys talk about, like, something good in that area. Where it's like, well, yeah, my congregation is helping this or doing that, and
Hmm.
um, I'm sure I've had one or two. So many aren't connected at times, but definitely if obviously if somebody's in your congregation, to really help there. And then just, think about, okay, there's people in our community, in our area. How can we be of help there? Can we reach out to them and say, well, we're willing to, foot the bill for this or help you get transportation there, or and really try to do that with no strings attached, of course, and just be helpful carrying people. Because especially especially a smaller community, I would say too, is everyone knows the person that went to prison and what he did, and what the issue is, and they may ostracize the family,
Hmm.
because of what the crime was. And for somebody to step forward and say we're here for you could be huge, would be
Hmm.
very huge
Yeah,
support.
very much so.
To be able to look past the the crime part of it. Walks a fine line. I always run into that when I think of just as a you know jail chaplain or jail minister. You go in and then you're someplace else, you're talking to people, and they're like, you know they're the victims of the crime very often, and have
Hmm.
experienced crime, and you're talking
Yep.
about going visiting the people that hurt me.
Yeah.
They're not always happy about that. And right from the it's very, they struggle with that concept, let's say.
Hmm.
I wouldn't
Sure.
say they're angry, but they're not necessarily like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
um, yeah. Sometimes they do come to terms with it by saying, well, yeah, they really need some help, so go help them.
Hmm. Yeah.
but but uh, sometimes you got to have people kind of working both sides of it.
Hmm.
I think there are those who go in to visit those in jail, and I think you got to have people that are also visiting the people at home, and
Definitely.
not necessarily the same person
Yeah.
doing that. I don't think that necessarily always works. Well, it can't
Hmm.
sometimes. In state prison, you can't do that.
Right.
Right? State prison, for minister volunteer there. So
At least in Wisconsin state prisons.
Wisconsin, yeah, yeah. So, hmm
I know
but
there's can think of at least one ministry that has been going for a while here in Milwaukee area. It's just transportation. That's all it's set up for. Getting families to prisons. Um, yeah, they recognize this is a ministry need. This is a way to show God's love to families that are separated because of incarceration. So transportation. That's all they do.
Nice.
I got to imagine it's probably a little bit better than the. I worked for a bus company in Milwaukee a few decades ago, and they had a prison bus run.
Mm.
They would take a charter
Hmm.
and fill it up and go up to Waupun or something. And yeah, the drivers didn't usually have too much good to say about those trips,
Mm.
unfortunately. But I think
Uh-huh.
if it's in a setting where maybe a ministry, when it's seen more as ministry, and that's a whole different aspect of how you look at it,
Yeah. Yeah. I
and
can
the
see
people that are
that.
involved. So
Hmm.
I'm hoping that's much more a better experience than what I heard
Hmm.
about the people that took the prison run.
Yeah.
You know,
Boy, when it's a family, the kind of thing you're describing, Mark, a family in the congregation. Uh, our loved one is in a prison 3 hours away. Uh, to set up something, somebody can give them a ride uh, once a month or whatever. That is so appreciated. Now, can if I could, I want to go back for a minute to this bit about a person becoming a member uh, while they're in prison.
Mhm.
Um, I I know. Let's see, several people I work with. They talk about just taking a person through a membership course, and then they are members at large of the denomination. Um, some people like doing it that way. I think they're missing something. Then the idea that I'm now a member of a real community, an actual congregation where people get together on Sunday mornings, where people pool their efforts and whatever they have to make some things happen in their community. And now I'm part of that, even though I've never met these people, possibly. Uh, I've joined up with a Christian community. Uh, there's something neat about that. to get a certificate in the mail that says you are now a member of this community or this congregation. We welcome you. We're glad to have you. So, start to get the congregational newsletters or etc. Something that's for a lot of guys. This is a change in my life. I'm part of something good.
Mm.
And a neat thing with that too, even if guy doesn't know exactly where he's going to be released to, uh, so maybe the congregation isn't going to be in the community that he ends up living in. That's still okay. It's still for that time being. I've made connection with this community, this Christian community. They supported me, and maybe they'll help me transition into a different congregation closer to where I end up living.
I think that's really, really huge, Phil. I think that's a great, movement in the sense of, again, creating those connections and
Mhm.
a feeling of belonging to something, of having some purpose. Um, Even wondering, in what ways could this person, serve the congregation, even from
Yeah,
prison. Um,
definitely.
there could be, boy, there could be some different ideas there.
Hmm.
that, that
Yeah, very much so.
if we just imagining and just kind of going out there and saying, what if, what could,
Hmm.
and drop the barriers that we have there and the
Yeah.
fears. I think that's, people have talked about sometimes where, and we've been talking about it for months of, the struggle of coming out and coming into, a new situation and a congregation and all the barriers that might be there.
Hmm.
Definitely, this is one way to break a lot of those down
Yeah.
before you actually walk in the door. If
Hmm.
and especially making the congregation aware of this and making the congregation a part of this in different ways. I just think now of the concept of, with some of the video things that could be done, you could actually participate possibly in some way on a Sunday morning.
I
Uh,
think that is possible with
you know,
depending on the internet platform that's being used.
yeah,
I
yeah.
think
I
there
mean,
is
just to
some
think
churches have done it.
maybe
It's
there could
possible.
be,
Hmm.
and yeah, and
Definitely a good thing.
it's just such a mind bending thought
Hmm.
process here, really
Hmm.
approaching the whole concept of things very differently.
Hmm.
But it starts sometimes very simply, going back to like the pen pal,
Yeah.
um, or the email devotions, and then we grow from there. But keeping those contacts, um, reaching out that way.
Mm.
Yeah.
You bring up that thing about how could the guy or woman, while they're incarcerated, how could they benefit the congregation they have now joined? Uh, I I'm trying to think if I've seen this done. I know guys have time on their hands. They write. They have insights. Uh, Boy, to be able to get those into the hands of the congregation, to get those published, to say here's a thought from our brother at so and so prison. I the one example I'm thinking of is it's a separation. It's not an incarceration separation. I'm thinking of a young man I met who's he's severely autistic. He's nonverbal, uh, but he writes. He sits down at a computer. He writes poetry. He writes essays. He writes these wonderful, deep, personal thoughts, encouraging thoughts, and his congregation makes use of those. Those get published in congregational publications all the time. They get posted on bullet board. So here's this guy coming up from across this barrier of autism and benefiting his congregation. Uh, Same thing could easily be done for somebody in prison.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that that statement definitely gives us a springboard into encouraging more conversation as we're thinking about how we can use technology um, to better walk with people who are incarcerated, so that we can work on establishing those relationships, um, even before they become returning citizens, and we continue the journey there. With that being said, I think this is probably a good time for us to close up. So, Phil, Mark, which one of you is going to pray us out today?
Oh man, you gotta yeah. Flip a holy coin. Flip a sacred coin. Uh,
Boom.
I think Mark is saying, not me. Or are you flipping a coin?
Flipping the coin, it was flipping up. Flipping up.
oh, it hit the ceiling and it's not coming down. Yeah.
Well,
That's how you decide how much money to put it to give as your offering. You toss it up in the air, and whatever God catches, He can keep. That's how you all work it, right? Oh,
Yes, yeah.
okay.
something like that, sure. All
Heard that.
right.
All right, I'll do it. You twisted my arm, Lord God. You're expert at crossing distances, getting past barriers. Uh, you did it in Jesus. You came into our world. You came into our life. You came into our humanity. You're good at this, and you've told us follow me. So uh, help us to hear your voice and go where you're leading. Don't let barriers of fear of the strangeness, the difference, the difficulties of getting just plain getting communications to people who are behind razor wire. Don't let those things block your wonderful work of establishing your kingdom. Don't let those stop us. Help us see possibilities, not just obstacles, and keep on working in us, God, so that we want to break down these barriers. We want to get together with our brothers and sisters. We want to see what does God have for me that He wants to deliver through this brother, sister who's wearing prison green or jail orange. How can we benefit both ways? Um, keep this going, God. You've wonderful things are happening, and we pray for more. Ask Him for this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
All right.
Well, thank you everyone for joining us tonight, and we hope that you have a good rest of your night.
Blessings all.